Thanks for joining, everyone. Today's webinar is called Think More, Do Less. It's about how to be more efficient, a more efficient developer and add more value to your team. A little bit about me. I've been coding for 25 years now. I started out basically looking at the source code for Yahoo and going, how does this HTML stuff work? And kind of fast forward to today, I won't go into all the in-between, but today I am a consultant helping enterprise clients write better code and work with more efficient processes. I'm married, and my wife and I love to travel and try new things. We've been to several countries and just love new things and challenges, which kind of coincides with both work and play. At the bottom, and these will be on the last slide as well, that's my name, Joe Colburn, and my email, joe.colburn@integral.io. So let's get into it. Let's talk about our agenda, and I'm going to post a link at the bottom here. I mentioned that there's a slide deck that will be shared. So I posted the link, and we'll post it again at the end, just in case you don't catch it. But we're going to go through this pretty quickly. There's a lot of information to share. And so while we're doing that, we're going to save some of the questions till the very end. And a lot of the things that we go over will have links to. So you can go through the slide deck when we're all done if you want to research some of those links and see some shortcuts. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shortcuts, and we're not going to go through all of them. So you're going to want to look at those links anyway. So we're going to start with shortcuts. Then we're going to go into automation, and then plugins. Those are our three main sections, and we're going to do some examples of all these things throughout. And then, like I said, at the end, we'll take questions, and I'll relink the slides, and we'll link that again for anyone who joins throughout the day, throughout the hour, I should say. Hopefully, we don't take all day. Okay, so let's dive in. Shortcuts. So shortcuts kind of have a stigma, right? A lot of times you might think that shortcuts are bad, and they can be bad. For example, you probably don't want your pilot on a flight that you're going to be on skipping some of the pre-flight check stuff. That's a shortcut that would probably be bad. Copying and pasting code just blindly, like finding a solution on Stack Overflow and not understanding it, that I would consider a shortcut that's bad. But there's a lot of good shortcuts too, and this is what today's talk is about, is identifying a lot of these good shortcuts that will help you save time while also not compromising the quality of your code or your work process. So keyboard shortcuts for your operating system. We're going to warm up with some simple stuff that you may already know. You may have seen some of these. You may use them daily, actually. And some may be new to you, but we'll warm up with some of the simpler stuff here. And then we'll follow up with a ton of other really good shortcuts. So for starters, let's dive into some Mac text editing. So I'm just going to go to text application here. And I've got some stuff in here already, right? So just some really basic stuff. Let's try and delete a full line, right? So you can highlight the whole line and just hit delete instead of, deleting one character at a time. You can jump back and forth with Command Shift to do a full line. So that's Command Shift, right key, left key to unhighlight. If you're at the end of the line, you can do it that way as well. Same thing with options. So these keys that I'm going to explain are on a Macintosh, but within the links, you'll be able to see how some of that works for Windows as well. And a lot of it translatable, like Control on Windows is really usually translatable to Command on a Mac. And Alt and Option are also kind of interchangeable between the two. So here we have a option right, an option left. So that's one word at a time. And then we have, what else do I have I want to show? I guess that's kind of it for this. There's a lot of other things that you can do in text editing, but I want to be brief because we have a lot to cover. And I'll show just really quickly some of the stuff that we have. So these are what the links look like. I'm not going to go through each one, but essentially these are the shortcuts that I've linked to. So there's a lot here, and you can kind of see, you can open a new tab like Command T and Command Shift T. So I'll let you go through these at your leisure. And we'll go through a few more examples. So let's take a look at, next, I think we'll look at some CLI shortcuts. So something that we can do here is, let's say you have a long command, right? Git, and then some stuff, right? Probably wouldn't look like that. If you want to move back to the beginning of the line, you can use Command left and Command right, similar to text editing. And then same with Option or Alt. You can move around in that way. So that's kind of simple. Jumping back away from that, let's go back over here. And if you use Command Space on a Mac, on a Windows, I think it's just Windows key, and I think similar on Linux. And that brings up in Mac, it's called Spotlight Search. And you can do a lot of things from a Spotlight Search. So we're just going to show a couple of things really quickly. One thing is, for example, you could search for a file. So if I search for a webinar, I can see it pulls up my webinar slide notes, and I can access it immediately without going in, searching through a direct file tree or a file program to find it. It's a really quick way to get to things. If you have some math that you need to do, 1, 2, 3 times 4, 5, 6, you can get the answer immediately. And you don't have to try and remember that's 56088. You can hit Command C to copy it, and then just drop it in your wherever you want to paste it. So there's a lot of stuff like that that you can do. Again, I won't go through everything, but those are just a couple of basics. And then we have, I guess I just have a final note on that, and that's something I already mentioned, that a lot of that stuff you can kind of convert from Mac to Windows to Linux. A lot of them are really transferable. And sometimes it's a matter of just saying, well, he said Option left in Windows, it might be Alt left, for example. Okay, so let's move on to some keyboard shortcuts for your IDE. Now I use IntelliJ IDEA, excuse me. And I also use WebStorm, and I use VS Code, and there's plenty of other IDEs out there, Sublime, and just several. So one thing that you can do is look at these individual links, or just do a search for keyboard shortcuts and your IDE name, and you'll find a ton of resources on it. So let me take a look at what I wanted to show first here. I won't open these links. We'll save a little time by not going to each of these links. You get the idea. They're going to have shortcuts in them, and a lot of notes on how they work. So let's go into IntelliJ, and for any of these shortcuts, you can do a search for individual shortcuts as well on Google, and just say, how do you close a file panel? So that's the first one we'll show. So if you want more development space, you might not want that file panel open. And so one easy thing to do is just close it so you can see more of your code on the screen at a time. This code is kind of small. Let's see. Hopefully you can read the code. It's not really about what's in the code as much as just kind of how we're manipulating it. So that should probably be okay. So closing the file panel and opening it is something that you know because I just told you it's Command 1. But you can also mouse over, at least in IntelliJ and WebStorm, and I think it's true for some other IDEs as well. You can mouse over and see that the commit panel is Command 0. So if I then hit Command 0, I can verify that's true. And the same thing with some of the panels on the bottom. For example, you have a terminal, that's Command F12. No, I hit the wrong key there. In any case, you can look through any of those and kind of do your own discovery. And the same exists for the menus up here. So if I wanted to, for example, paste, let's for example, if I want to copy, you can use Command C. I mean, some of these are you already know maybe, but some you may not know, like column selection mode, Shift Command B. So it's beneficial when you're using an IDE, especially if you're new to the IDE, spend a good amount of time digging through the menus and looking at the things that you think you'll use most, and memorize some of those shortcut keys. And then when you are using the IDE, if you find yourself using the mouse a lot, take a minute to, one thing I'll do is I'll say, okay, well, I want to know how to multi-select something. So I'll go to my find and I'll figure out, okay, this is how I select all occurrences. I forget that one all the time. So I go to the menu, but I don't click here. I look at the command and then I use my keyboard to do it. Okay, so let's move on to a couple other things. You can also collapse and expand things. So for example, this function here, it's kind of a long function. It's a big mess, but we can collapse the whole function and expand the whole function. And that's Command or Control minus and plus. So just minus to collapse, plus to expand. Same thing for the whole file, but hold down Shift. So that collapses the whole file. All of the functions are collapsed now, and then you can expand them all back out again with plus. That one's fairly simple. And then we have Command, let's see, Command X, V, and D. So X and V are kind of standard things. So let's say I want to cut this return line. Command X cuts it, V pastes it. Command C copies it, V pastes it again. Command D is a shortcut for that 2 steps because it just makes a duplicate right below. And then you can also move things around. So let's say I want to do a return true. I mean, I'd probably do it a different way, but for the sake of the example, we'll duplicate, and then I can Command Shift and arrow key it down. And unfortunately, that messed up my my demo for a little later. So let me re-break that code. Okay, so that's how you move. Command Shift up and down can move stuff around for you. What's next? So here's a slightly more complicated but very useful one that I tend to use a lot. And this is the one that I just went over, which I've already forgotten, but I have it in my notes. It's Control Command G to select all. So I'm going to hit Control and Command and G, and it's going to select all of those, every instance of the highlighted text. And now I can move around and say, I really want those to be just equals, not equals. So that's how you can do some quick changes to something that is in multiple places in your code. Okay, so one more thing that I think is also really helpful is multi-cursor, and this is something that people search for a lot. So multi-cursor is the idea of having a cursor both on this line, and also on this line at the same time, so you can edit all 3 lines. So let's say I want to do this I want to add this text. I'm already doing it wrong. So if I wanted to add that to all of those places, I could do that manually, or I can speed up the process by using multiple cursor. And to do that, you hold down Alt or Option on a Mac and left click and drag however many cursors you want, however many lines you want. So in this case, I just want those 3. And now I can move around, I can add something before that, or I can add the word thing after. And so if I'm adding the same place, the same thing, it really helps out. Or if I just want to comment at the end of each of those, and the comments are different, I can do that and then just hit escape and add the comment I want for each one. So that's how that works. And that's about it for some of those examples. Let's go back and look at some command line shortcuts. Again, we have these are links. Anything highlighted in red like this is a link. So if you look at the slide deck, which will be linked to at the end again, and was linked in the beginning, you'll be able to get to any of these examples as well. Okay, so let's move on to command line shortcuts. I'm doing a time check for myself, and I think we're running kind of on time. Looking pretty good. So for command line shortcuts, we're going to talk mostly about Linux and Mac shortcuts, but again, these are links to some shortcuts that I found that may help you out, and of course, doing your own searches may yield some more fruitful or different results as well. So let's take a look at some of those command line shortcuts that I've prepared for today. So for starters, we already talked about the idea of looking at, you get a sneak peek into what I was doing before we started. I accidentally broke a module that I'm going to use. We already kind of looked at how this works, right? You can jump around with the arrow keys. You can hit Control-C to not run a command instead of backspacing it all the way out. My life changed when I realized that. And then you can also use history. I use this a lot because I run a lot of different commands. I work with a lot of different command line interfaces and SDKs. And because of that, I don't always remember all the commands, and that's okay. So I use history, which looks through your history, and you can just run history by itself and it'll show you everything, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you how I use it. I use pipe, which says basically take the output of the first command and send it to the second command. And the second command I'm going to use grep, which is a command that lets me search within a body of text for the thing that I want to search for, which in this case will be goto. So I'm saying search for goto within the results of the history command. And that's what that pipe does. Sometimes you'll see it with a space. It's not required, but it looks a little cleaner. So when I do that, you can see I've been kind of busy preparing for this. I've created some aliases, and so I can see what those aliases are. I remember they had goto, but I don't remember was it goto development or goto dev? Was it goto stage or was it goto QA? I don't remember, but now I don't have to remember. I look at my history. And then something else that you can do from your history is, where is it? It's back in here somewhere. There we go. So I can find this one, right? I wanted to see what my alias commands looked like in my shell file. So if I look at this, this is my history line, 6001. I can use a bang, which is just an exclamation point, and then 6001, which is the number of the command in my history list. And when I hit enter, what that does is it gives me a new command line with that command already there, and I can change it if I want. I'm not going to, I'm going to keep the same command. And I just hit enter and it'll run that command and it'll show my aliases. So that's a handy way of just rerunning any command, especially if you have really long commands like you see on 6126. for example, I could run that command by doing this 6126, and it runs the command again for me. That alias I removed since that command was run, so it's going to error there. Okay, and then we'll see what those aliases do in a minute. We'll come back to that. So let's go back over here. So that's probably all we want to talk about for shortcuts. We can move on to automation just to keep on track here. For automation, when I think about anything that I've done that I do a lot, or any kind of repetitive task that I do over and over again, I start thinking about how to automate that, because my time is valuable during the day, and I don't want to spend my time redoing the same thing over and over again if I can make a robot do it for me. And by robot, I mean script or built-in dev tool or whatever. So we have some automation that's built into dev tools. I'm not going to go too deep into that, but I'll show you an example. Just kind of get the wheels turning about how you might think about that when you're working with any other tools, like things that you might want to look for in your own dev tools or software that you're using. So we'll take a look at Postman API calls, and I don't want to peek on that yet. Okay, so this I had to do a system update last night, so everything got shrunk back down. Okay, so hopefully this is somewhat readable. This is a very simple call. I'm not going to get too into the weeds on it, but it's essentially a call to the World Time API. It's a free API where you can just go get the time and date info. So I'm going to make a call to this. Before I do, I want to show you something. So we have this global value, and I'll actually delete this. It's called day of year. I don't know if you can read that. It's called day of year, and right now I've just emptied out the current value. We'll save that. And the idea here is, from this API, I want to automate the getting of the day of the year, so I don't have to come up with that in my head or go look on a calendar or go search on Google. And then I want to take it over to here to a Twitter development API and post on my Twitter account a post that says today is day number X out of the year. But I don't want to do any of the work. I want to do that automatically, right? So to do that, I will take the value from here, store it in the global, and then use the global over here to post. So we'll show a quick example. I'm going to send this API. Hopefully it works. You know, things break during demos. I'm not going to get into the script, but here's the magic right here. It sets the global variable inside Postman to this variable, and we can see that it has now set it to 256. So we have that as a variable that we can use in any other actions that we do. So over here, in a completely separate API, when I want to use that variable, you can see it's stored. And this is just Postman's magical variable annotation. And you can get into the docs and Postman and kind of learn a little bit more about that if you want. But that's just kind of an example to get you thinking about how you could use that in your day-to-day activities to speed things up. In a real-world example, we'll hit an API to get an authentication token, and then I store that token in a secure variable, and then I use that token automatically in other calls that I make. So I don't have to go and copy that somewhere else, and then I accidentally forget that I copied it and I paste my token into a chat window or something silly. Okay, so that's it for Postman. So let's move on. I'm going to scroll my notes a little bit. Let's move on to some GitHook examples. So I mentioned webhooks in here, but we won't go into webhooks. It's something that you may have used or may use in development. And it also does help automate things. But today we'll just talk about GitHooks. And so there's several reasons that you could use GitHooks, or that you might want to use GitHooks in your development, in personal development, or especially in development for a company. One of the obvious ones is running tests, just making sure that you run tests so that you can see if anything failed before you do a commit. It's I hate doing a commit and then doing a commit right after saying fix broken tests. If you're doing test-driven development, that doesn't happen anyway, but when you're not, that tends to happen if you don't run tests before a commit. So that's always a good way to use that. And then quality gates, which is similar, where you can run tests and then let's say you have a quality gate, a pre-push hook that says you cannot push code if any tests are broken. So that's how that would work. And I'll show you how those tests work, and we'll show an example test and how that is actually working in action. So staying in the same directory here, we're going to try and do a git push. And before I do, I want to show you where the hooks exist. And you can read some more documentation and really get into it. But essentially, they live in the .git. And another shortcut here is you can hit tab and it'll autocomplete for you in many shells. And then it's hooks, so I'll type HO. If I hit tab before it knows which one, it'll show me all the options, and I can actually tab to it as well. So if you look at all the Git hooks here, it's kind of hard to read in red, but essentially you have commit message, you have a bunch of other ones that all end in .sample. So any Git repository that you create or that you clone to work in is going to have a .git directory, which stores all the metadata and things like these hooks and things that are useful to Git. So in all these cases, you'll have at least in a NuGet repository, you're going to have all these .sample Git hooks. So, for example, commit-message MSG used to be commit-msg.sample, but I've modified it and I removed the .sample to make it active. And so what that tells Git is anything in this directory without .sample with the right name is going to be run, and based on the name, that tells it when to run that. So in this case, I'm actually going to do, if you hit up arrow after typing part of the command, you can get that whole command back without going through all of the history. Anyway, so here's a command I run using, again, that grep tool with a pipe. So I'm saying, show me all the hooks, but then grep and show me anything that's not, doesn't have the word sample in it. That's what the -v is. And so I can see I only have one active commit hook. So we'll take a look at that. That hook looks like this. It's very simple. It's just a shell script, and it checks the length of your commit message, which is the $1. So it takes input, and in this case, the input's the commit message, and Git handles all that for you. And then it tells you, hey, that's less than 10 characters. Your commit message is too short. This message isn't very useful because it doesn't tell me how long it needs to be, but the idea is your commit message should be useful. So a short commit message, like git commit hi. Hi is not a useful message for fix. Fix is not a fix. We'll use past tense. Fix is not a useful message, right? So Git says that's too short. But if we change it to added appropriate variables and fix tests for user login, right? That's a little bit more useful of a message. And it's still complaining. So my hook is broken, but I wrote it very quickly the other night. But you get the idea. The Git hook is supposed to take a look at the input coming in, which is the commit message, and then based on whatever logic you put in there, it will take some action or deny some action. For example, not letting me write a commit. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. That's the first failure 30 minutes in, so that's not too bad. Okay, so Scripting repetitive tasks. This one's kind of fun as well. It's not specifically related to the development. It's very useful in development, but it can be useful in all sorts of things as well as development. And it's just always a good tool to keep in your back pocket. The ability to just recognize something that you do a lot and be able to script it. So hopefully you can still understand me as I popped in a cough drop. I had the flu this weekend. So let's start with some command line aliases. We already kind of touched on those. So if we did, remember we looked at history and we grepped for goto. And we saw these aliases, right? And we actually saw what they looked like, right? Let me, what did I do? 6170. There we go, 6170. I already forgot what the command was. So these are the aliases that I added. You can add, look up, I use omizsh, but if you use bash or any other shell, you can actually look that up. In my case, it's omizsh. I've added these to my configuration file. And essentially all they do is set an environment. So these aren't real. I just set these up for this demo, but the idea here is you can say alias, and then the thing you want to alias, the command that you want to alias, short command you want. So in this case, like go to QA. And then it will do the thing on the other side of the equal sign, which is a few different commands setting environment variables. And then if I echo out those environment variables like we do with 6130, only this last part doesn't work, so we'll take that off. Oh, I wanted to echo those out. There's a, let me find that real quick. There's a good comment in chat too about creating an executable isn't always effective, so there are scripts, and yeah, there's several ways to do things. Sometimes it's better to automate something through a program like Postman. Sometimes you might want to do it through a script. You can do some of the same thing I showed in Postman a minute ago can also be done. Let's see. Okay, so the same thing can also be done in a script as well. So you can do it in multiple different ways. Anyway, let's take a look at what we're doing in our alias, and I'll just echo those out. Yeah, so we ran goto QA. So if I'll echo, for example, environment variable, and it shows it is set to QA, and I'll echo db host, and we'll look at that too. And we can see that it is sum.qa.db.host. And then if I run the other alias, go to dev, spell it right, then it doesn't give me any feedback because I didn't tell it to. But if I echo out the host, you can see it's changed. It doesn't have QA in there anymore. And if I echo out the environment, you can see that is now dev. So that's just how you can make things a little bit quicker by setting up aliases for commonly run commands. Let's talk about manipulating some files. Let me actually catch up in my notes here. So if you want to manipulate some files, for example, let's say you're selling a bunch of things on eBay and you do it a lot. So in order to do that, you spend a lot of time creating photos of the things that you're selling, but you don't want your competition, let's say you sell something that lots of people sell, you don't want your competition to steal your photo and be able to use all your hard work in creating that photo in order to compete with you with their own listing. So you want it to be unique. You want to watermark that logo. So let's take a look at how we would do that. And I wrote this script specifically for this reason and just happened to be a good fit, I think, for this to show off. So let's see. Let's open a logo file. So we have, I'll go into how the script works in a minute. So let's say you have this this logo file, this one here. And you can use the open command. That's another shortcut here. If you use the open command, it will open a file in whatever application is most appropriate for that file, whatever is configured as the default, rather. And it's also handy to note that I have a shortcut to move this to the right screen. So I just used a keyboard shortcut to do that. We'll go into that in a minute. Anyway, so there's my example logo. It has a clear background. It's kind of hard to tell here, but I want this logo on every image. The problem is I have all these images. Let's do this. I have all these images that I want to put a logo on, but they're different sizes. And so I want to, I have to take that logo and make it a smaller size. So I want to sell a bunch of bananas. I want to sell a MacBook. I want to sell a kazoo. That's Kazoo Kid. Look that up if you've never seen it. It's wonderful. And then I want to sell a sports car in this boat because I don't use it. But they're all different sizes. And the Kazoo Kid, if I use the wrong size watermark logo, it's going to cover his whole face and really distract from what I'm advertising, which is the kazoo. So we'll close these. These are, if you notice, none of these have a logo on them. Close all those. And then we'll run the script. And what the script does, and I'm not going to get into the code, I'll just kind of describe it very briefly, is it automates the task that I used to do manually of looking at the size of the image that I want to put a watermark on, determining based on that size how small to make the watermark, resizing the watermark image that I want to put on my sales image, attaching that to the sales image and saving it as a new image, and of course backing up my original images in case I want to do a different watermark later or do something else. So it does all those things. And before I would have to do that and then do it again on the next image and again on the next image. So in this case, what I wanted was a script that would find all the images in my directory. It only works with JPEGs, but that's okay. Finds all the images in this directory and goes through each image and adds the watermark and then throws it in the after folder. In the meantime, it backs up the original image in the before folder, and then it removes them all from there. So we'll run this real quick. And it's just really simple. It just, I put a couple of outputs in here so I can see where it's at in the process if I'm doing 100 photos or something like that. And then the result, you can see the images are no longer here. In the before directory, they are backed up. And you can see they exist now in the after directory. And if we open them up, sorry, because it's only images in there. Then we can roll through these and you can see there's one size logo. It's about the same size because those two photos are similar in size, but it's much smaller on the Kazoo Kid because the image that we're putting on is smaller. And then it's a little bigger on the Mac because that's a bigger image. And our bunch of bananas photo is now protected by that watermark as well. So that's just an example of how you can use some scripting, and I will show it really quickly, but I won't go into all the details of how it works. So this is it. Anything above what you can't see is just comments, essentially. Just does a for loop, does all the work, and then it's done. Okay, let's move on and keep on track here so we can leave a little time, hopefully, for questions at the end. What did we miss? We didn't miss anything yet. All right, so we're in the last section here. Pretty good on time, I think, still. So let's talk about some plugins and built-ins. Your operating system, your IDE, and your web browser, just to name a few things, automatically have some things built in but also they offer the ability to have plugins or programs that you can add on to make your life a little easier and help with your efficiency. So we're going to go through some of those in this order. We'll talk about some browser dev tools. Very briefly, we'll touch on that. Some OS helpers. I'll show just one that I use a lot, which we've kind of already seen. And then some IDE plugins, which we'll spend a little bit more time there. So let's start with dev tools. Let's do some style changes. So to do that, I'm going to open a file that I created that is fantastic design. You will love it. Okay, maybe it needs some help. Let's try and get it some help. Let's say I created this file, created this page, and I deployed it in my process. I can't see it locally for some reason, or it's just harder to do it that way. Go back and forth in your code in the browser, browser. One thing that you can do is you can check your changes. You can do very simple changes like style and even change content and see how it lays out and that kind of thing right here on the web page. And to do that, you can open DevTools. So to do that, I hit F12. If you hit escape, you get like the dev notes there. But so you hit F12, or an alternate way. See, if I hit F12, then I have to go over to elements and find the element that I want. An easier way, let's close that. An easier way is let's say this title is horrible to read. So I can right click on the title and say inspect. And then when I go into this inspection, now I can see that it's already on title, and I can see over here the element. And I have the style color is yellow. Okay, so I definitely don't want the color to be yellow. So let's try, I don't know, like how about blue violet? Blue violet looks good. Okay, so we changed blue violet, but we noticed right away that the bottom text isn't as nice. And you can arrow back and forth and it'll show you which one you're on. So we look at that and it's like the same color. So I kind of want that to be a different color. So I'm gonna make that actually black. And you can kind of tell, I don't know if it's hard to see on your screen. It gives you some suggestions. Try this on your own computer and you'll get be able to better see what's going on. So you can change colors and get an idea right there. You can change the title and see how it lays out if you have a really long title. So let's say you want to see how this is reacting with a really long title. You can add a really long title and see what's going on. In this case, my screen's wide enough to protect that from going too wide. But you know, for example, you can do that. See, oh, it bounces down. And you can do some of these things to kind of get a good idea quickly of what you're doing in your code without actually doing it in your code. It's very handy for style changes a lot of times. We'll rip through a couple other quick things in here, things that you probably want to take some time to explore on your own if you haven't yet. So we have a console where we can see any errors. So if we refresh the page, we don't really have any errors on this page. It's not doing anything, but if there were anything, you would be able to see it here. In the console, you can also do things like take a look at the document.location. And if you hit enter, it's going to show you the location. You can really dive in and see more detail. So there's things that you can do, run JavaScript right in here. For example, some of it's more useful than other things, but you can do things right in the console that you don't need to go into your code to do. And then also we have sources, so you can look at the source for each file and see what it's doing. There's the source for that file. Network is very handy. You can reload this page and see the network traffic. So this is something fun to experiment, and you can actually zoom in on things and just something to really spend some time discovering. And then there's other things like performance, memory, application, security, Lighthouse, which tells you how fast your page is loading, etc. Just some good things to dive into and really learn about. So let's move on to some OS helpers. We talked very briefly about OMI ZSH. I'm just going to touch again really quickly. This is more of a shell helper. OMI ZSH is a tool that lets you have plugins that, for example, you can display the time, display the Git branch I'm on, the state of my Git work, that I have changes that need to be applied, my username, all those things. If you want to explore that more, go and search for, oops, let me go back. Go and search for OMI ZSH, and you'll be able to get a good idea of that, of what that is, how to install it, and any plugins or themes that you can use with that. The next thing I want to show really quickly is Rectangle. And we're going to go a little fast because we're running short on time. But so Rectangle is this tool that you can kind of see up here. If I click on it, it gives me all these options for screen. And so, for example, I can use Control Option left and right, and I can move this window to the left or right. So if I want to do side by side, have an editor on the right and a web browser on the left, for example, I can do that. And I hit this Control Option Enter to go back to full screen. So that's another nice tool for Mac. You can find similar tools, and some of it's actually similar features are built into Windows or Linux. So that can be really handy as well. My dog hears me talking and wants in. Okay, so let's move on to some IDE plugins. We're going to go through some of these in a little bit more detail than others, but we'll go through them kind of quickly and then move on to some questions, I think, pretty shortly after. Okay, so in our IDE, I have all of these installed and I use them regularly. The first one, I have to give a hat tip to Robbie Cunningham, who showed me this one. Key Promoter X is a tool that identifies when you're using when you're trying to do something that you could use a shortcut for. And let's do an example of that. I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to hit cut. And Key Promoter X says, why did you use the mouse for that? There is a shortcut, and here's how you do it. There's a couple of ways, and it gives you the shortcuts. And you can disable that. I advise to never click on disable. If it's something you use enough that this alert will be annoying, it's something you use enough to learn the shortcut, in my opinion. So that's what Key Promoter X is in a nutshell. Just a very brief description of that. And briefly, here's how you would install it. You go to your plugins, and in your plugins, you can just search the marketplace. I'm in installed, but you can search the marketplace the same way for Promoter, Key Promoter X, and then just install it. Mine apparently needs an update. So that's the first one, to jog my memory. Next is Presentation Assistant. So Presentation Assistant, you've probably seen 3 or 4 times when I've been in the IDE, and you just didn't realize it yet. So let's show you what that is. I'm going to hit a command, and you can see what the command is at the bottom here. Presentation Assistant is designed for instances like this, or for pair coding. So if you're pair coding with someone and they have Presentation Assistant, you can see the things that they're doing on the keyboard without having to ask them. So that's what that is. I always ask people, or at least suggest them to install that, especially if I'm pairing with them, because it helps me to understand some of the things that they're doing, maybe shortcuts that I don't know about. And it helps them because I don't have to, I'm not asking them, hey, can you go back a sec and tell me how you did that? So that's what that does. Another one is Indent Rainbow. And there's also Rainbow Brackets, which is fairly similar. Both have the same goal, and that is to show you the indentation. You can see that here, each indentation level is a different color. So it's very easy to follow down from this bracket to where it ends. I have another tool that actually highlights them as well. But that's essentially what Rainbow Brackets or Indent Rainbow does. I like in the rainbow because it's a little bit more stark in showing you what's going on. Code Glance Pro, we already can see that as well. We have a long file. Let's say we're at the top of the file and I know I've got some class code I have to fix. I can see it right here and I can just drag right down to it. So it's just a preview scroll bar essentially that gives you a preview of all your code in your file. Makes it really easy to jump to where you need to be in a long file. And then while we're here, let's look at the last one, which is Prettier. And the way that this works is it identifies, you tell it what code you want to run Prettier on. And then when you run it, it identifies anything that needs to be cleaned up. When you have uglified code like this, it's all collapsed. Let's say, for example, I take this and collapse that into. So you can tell it, I want, and I'm just going to tell it this block. Actually, no, I want to do the whole thing. And I'll use another shortcut to do this. I'm going to collapse this. I'm going to highlight the whole line, which is technically now the whole function. And I'm going to expand it again so I can see what I'm doing. Now I've got the whole thing highlighted. And that took 3 keystrokes. And then I'm going to do one more keystroke, which is a little bit of Acrobat. Command Option Shift P. It's hard to remember, but I actually didn't look at my notes this time because I've done it several times this week. And that's what Prettier does. It makes your code pretty again. So if you have really some code that's all ugly, instead of hitting tab and using the arrow key and going down and fixing them all with 100 keystrokes, you can do it in one. Okay, so that's it for the plugins. There's plenty of other plugins for all the IDEs that you can explore. I advise you to do a quick search for those. So let's leave a couple minutes for questions. Before I do that, I want to urge you to never stop learning. Always ask for tips and tricks. Anyone who develops or is agile on their computer, ask them what tips and tricks they have. Search sites like Google, YouTube, Reddit, Stack Overflow, just to name a few. Pair program. Pair programming is a great way to learn things that you don't even know to ask about. You'll see someone doing it and you'll say, how did you do that? And that goes into the next thing. When you see that, pause, ask them, how did you do that? Let me learn with you. And then on the other side of that, share what you learn with others. I cannot stress that enough. Let me just jump to the top slide. How to be more efficient developer and add more value to your team. So that's the add more value to your team portion of it, is you want to share that, any of your learnings with other people. So I appreciate everyone waiting until the end with any questions. I'm going to take a breath now, and I will say, please ask any questions that you have in chat.